Hey friends, welcome to Huge Head Studio. My name is Robbie, and today we are jumping back into the series we started a few weeks ago of the middle-aged Mutant Ninja Turtles. This time, we're making Donnie. For the first video in the series, we sculpted Leo, who is the group's disciplined leader that stayed in shape. Donnie is kind of the opposite. He's the brain of the group, and he's a huge tech nerd, so if you want to compare it to the Breakfast Club, Leo's like the athlete, and Donnie's like the brain, just without the fear of getting stuffed in a locker. As teenage turtles, Donnie was probably the most timid of the four. Not a pushover, he could definitely hold his own, but he always preferred tech and gadgets over straight hand-to-hand combat. And as he gets older, that mindset doesn't really go away. I imagine if you didn't enjoy fighting as much in your youth, you definitely don't like doing it when you're older and your bones are creaky. Also, I imagine if you spend your life building tech, you'd start to see it physically. Like a bit of tech neck from long nights hunched over a keyboard, and glasses from years of screen strain, and eyes that always look a little tired. While Leo held on to a lot of his old physique, Donnie probably didn't as much. Like, I don't think he'd be fat, at least not as fat as I picture an older Mikey being, but Donnie's build is more wiry with a little extra softness around the middle. And even if he still trains occasionally with his brothers, there's only so much that can do when most of your free time is spent at a computer eating Cheetos or whatever junk food mutant turtles eat. Anyway, while I was babbling, we took the same steps for Donnie as we did for Leo. We built an armature wire skeleton, wrapped it in aluminum foil for bulk, and then covered it in a layer of polymer clay. Then we got to work on the shell because it's basically just a copy of the one we made for Leo, so we already know how it's supposed to look. Once we got it done, I inserted some strips of armature wire into pre-drilled holes on the shell and then pushed them into the soft clay on the body to mark the attachment points. Then I drilled holes at those points on the body, so now future Robbie has an easy way to attach the shell later on. With all that taken care of, I move on to the hands by squishing a ball of clay into a palm shape and then attach 3 fingers that are way too long so they look like weird alien fingers. So I trimmed them down slightly and then added creases so the fingers would bend easier at those points, and then wrapped them around a dowel that I'm using for Donnie's whooping stick. I then throw it in the oven to bake to lock in the progress, mostly because I have big sausage fingers and I don't trust myself not to completely ruin it if I keep touching it. It's like hitting Control S in real life. But it also allows an easy method to clean up some of the clunkier areas with some sanding, so I take my handy-dandy high-tech sanding tool that's just a strip of sandpaper taped to a popsicle stick and then go to town until the hands look fine. They're alright. After that, I add some little rings of clay to the wrist to blend the hands into the arms and then get started on Donnie's muscles. As I said, he's not big and built like Leo or Raph, but he's still a highly trained mutant ninja turtle with years of experience with the bow. So even if his belly's a little dumpy, his arms are still lean and built with old lingering muscle. But I imagine the older he gets, the longer he sits, so as time goes on, he still may work with the bow, but instead of doing it in a training room, he does it while leaning back in his computer chair. It's kind of like when kids were taking virtual gym while sitting on the couch during the pandemic. I add all the muscles close enough to the right areas so that they look believable, and then blend them all together. And then as I turn him upside down to blend the bottom of the arm, I prove exactly why I bake as I go by dropping the head on the table. But fear not, I am fully aware of my flaws. Like, not all of them, but enough of the artistic ones to know that I'm a spazzy little wrecking ball, so if there's ever anything I can do to reduce the mayhem that is me, I do it. Anyway, I take some rubbing alcohol and rub it on his boobies to make them nice and smooth, and then decide to move on to the head. To build up the beak, as I learned his little nosy snoot area is called in the last video, I attach 3 balls of clay and then blend them together. I compare it to the Leo sculpt to make sure the proportions are similar, and then smooth out the clay with some more rubbing alcohol before carving in his mouth and some laugh lines for age. Again, he's just middle-aged, not old, so I'm not going crazy with the age marks, just enough so he looks more experienced than a smooth-skinned teenage turtle. Also for this series, I'm modeling the heads after the 90s live-action movie because those turtle suits were amazing. Next, it's time to add the neck, so to give the tech neck look that I mentioned earlier, as well as the vibe of an older turtle like the one from Kung Fu Panda, I make the neck a little longer and thinner. After that, I get started on the turtle belly, which I learned in the other video has a real name, but I don't know how to pronounce it, so turtle belly it is. I slapped it on with the help of some bacon bun and then carved in all the little lines and cuts and grooves like I did with Leo to keep the look consistent. Then I baked some eyes and glued them into the socket so I could get to work on his mask. For the mask, I rolled some clay through my pasta maker to get it nice and flat, and then folded it over itself one time, and then rolled it through the pasta maker again to try to make it look like it's creased and imperfect. I think I had the right idea given how the one little crease line at the top turned out, but it probably could have been repeated a few times to get some more lines and folds worked in there, but I didn't do it that way, so instead I'll carve the details in manually. In the meantime, I gave him some sleepy eyes and then built up his brow to help portray his laid-back expression before carving in the lines and folds that I just rambled on about. With the mask done, I'm ready to accessorize, so I start by wrapping a wrap of some sort around the bow and then tried to do the same with the hand before realizing the bow was all kinds of in the way, so I removed the clay and pulled out the bow so I could finish wrapping the hands without any obstacles. Then I shoved the bow back in the hands and rewrapped it with a thinner strip of clay, which I think turned out better, so happy accident. After that, I give him some elbow pads because while Leo was rocking his old gear, Donnie knows the art of online shopping, so his gear is up to date. And that includes his smartwatch, because when you're getting older and fatter, it's nice to have a piece of tech on you at all times that can provide you with all kinds of data to prove your body is regressing. Next, I figure he needed something that could hold his bow while he's texting or calling for an Uber or whatever he does when he's out and about and not currently dueling any bad guys, and I figured what would be better for Donnie than an adjustable GoPro chest mount harness that he modified with a holster for his bow. So I made him a harness complete with an itty bitty little Squirtle keychain because Donnie's a nerd and a turtle, so of course he loves Pokemon and his favorite Pokemon would be a turtle. Actually, he'd probably like Metagross or something like that, but anyway, I added a tiny GoPro to the chest mount as well as a bunch of little buttons to decorate the harness because nerds like Donnie and me just love collecting colorful pins and buttons. After that, I rolled some more clay flat and then tied it into a knot to make the mask knot look more believable than the ball of clay that I made for Leo's knot, and then adjusted the mask tail so that they sat nice and pretty. And with that, the sculpt is done, so we're ready to paint. We start the paint job by applying the green skin in the same fast and loose method that we used last time so that the skin looks a little more realistic. Because skin, or at least the humanoid skin like we're shooting for here, is not flat. It's made up of layers of subtle color shifts and natural modeling, so letting some of the lighter base show through helps sell the effect early on. I follow that up with blending in like 4 or 5 layers of paint to the high points, making each layer a little lighter than the last by mixing in more yellow into the green, which builds up a nice gradient on the muscles and other high points and naturally pushes the contrast and color variation to continue the effort to make the skin feel more realistic. Then to push it a little further, I dip a hard bristle brush into some thin paint and then flick it onto the skin to again give it more depth and character and just feel more believable. Once I'm happy with the skin, I move on to the base coat for the shell with the same fast and loose style to give it variation and will kind of look like a low contrast version of the tortoiseshell pattern you see on glasses and stuff like that. Then I add another fast and loose lighter yellow layer to the shell and turtle belly just like I did with Leo so that they'll look cohesive on the shelf. It's not like an accurate turtle shell look, but more like a hybrid of the Ninja Turtle shells from the cartoon and the 1990 live-action movie. Anyway, after the shell, I move on to the wraps, which have to be purple, because like I said last time, these turtles love their color coordination. So I add a less saturated purple to his wraps and mask because unfortunately, color like people in turtles fades over time. Then I add some darker washes to the mask to push the shadows, and then follow it up with some lighter purple highlights so that everything has a decent enough amount of contrast and nothing's left looking flat. After that, I take a brown smoky wash and work it into all the wraps into the mask to add some grunge and aging. Next, I apply a layer of black to his watch band and his elbow pads and his harness and anything else that requires a black base coat before I get to detailing the little itty bitty details on his GoPro to try to make it look more recognizable. I apply the same grungy wash to his harness to give it some funk and to make it look worn, and then add a time to his smartwatch to try to make it look more like a smartwatch and not just a black square on his wrist. Then I do my best to paint Squirtle, not trying to detail him or anything, but just trying to color him enough to get the point across that it's supposed to be a tiny Squirtle. Next, I add some color and little designs to the buttons to give him a bit of character, most of which are more implied than legible, like on the Eddie Munson sculpt, but they're real small, so I did my best. Then I sketch the eyes on a few times until I get them placed just right, and then paint them with kind of a dark, muted purple. Finally, I glue on his little glasses that I made off camera, and with that, Donnie is done and ready to join his brother on the shelf. Well, I sure do hope you're enjoying this little series of the middle-aged Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's 2 down and 2 more to go, so if you'd like to see Raph and Mikey whenever we get around to them, be sure to like and subscribe so you can stay up to date on this series and all the other nonsense I come up with. But I reckon that's all for now, so thanks for watching and stay creative, and I'll see you on the next one.